your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Genshin Impact video, and today I'm just going to be talking about what if Zhongli never got buff or Geo never got buff. By the way, if you haven't liked the content, just leave a like and subscribe. I never pulled for the man Zhongli. I don't have Zhongli, so maybe some information that I have on here might be incorrect. Correct me in the comments. Anyways, when Zhongli first came out, or let me just start from the very beginning. When Zhongli was about to come out, a lot of people were hyping this man like the second coming of Jesus. I remember seeing all types of videos about Zhongli, how to build Zhongli, all that Zhongli stuff. People were saying that he's going to be a game changer, that he was going to be one of the best characters in the game. Some people were even suggesting that you build a physical Zhongli with a physical pike. Keep in mind that this was when Genshin, first came out. Not many people knew how to play the game. And believe me, there were a lot of people that did not know how to play Genshin back then. Most of the hype probably came from the fact that we already knew that Zhongli was an Archon, and since Venti, another Archon, was busted at this time, people were expecting Zhongli to be very valuable. Zhongli finally comes out, and the whole community was basically conflicted and confused on why Zhongli was so bad. One thing most people probably did is they probably built physical Zhongli because a lot of guides were saying that you should build a physical Zhongli. So of course they were going to get very bad results because that's not what you were supposed to do with Zhongli. Another factor on why he was bad when he was first released is because the Geo Resonance back then was pretty terrible. If you didn't know what the old Geo Resonance did back then, it basically increases resistance to interruption, and when protected by a shield, increases attack damage by 15%. That was it. The old Geo Resonance did not have the shield strength up, nor did it have the Geo Resistance shred on the enemies. So the old Geo Resonance back then was really bad. It's really great that they changed it. Third factor of why Zhongli was bad is because I think his shield was actually not that very strong. His shield was only really good against Geo-based attacks, and the only Geo enemies back in the day was the Geo Hypostasis and those big Geo Meta churls, or the big Geo churls, right? So Zhongli's shield back in the day was only useful against those enemies, and when he was facing against other enemies, his shield was just not good. So those were the reasons why Zhongli was very terrible at his release. There were a few content creators that were defending Zhongli, saying that he didn't need a buff, Zhongli was doing just fine. Were those content creators tripping? Most likely yes, they probably were tripping. But that's just how life is. When two people look at one same thing, they might actually be looking at different things. However, a majority of the community were definitely agreeing that Zhongli needed a buff. HoYoverse back in the day obviously knew about this Discord that was going around about Zhongli. HoYoverse was actually one of the few entities that were defending Zhongli. They were basically saying that Zhongli was fine, he does not need a buff. HoYoverse themselves actually said this. Now, what if HoYoverse decided to just stick true to their word and, they just decided, fuck these players, we're not buffing Zhongli or Geo. Geo would be in a lot worse state than it is right now. Beta wouldn't be as good because his elemental skill and his burst would hardly deal any damage since the enemy is not getting any Geo resistance shred. Arataki Itto would probably be one of the worst DPS characters in the game if Geo did not receive the buff that it has right now. In fact, Arataki Itto might end up being like another, Dea or Zhongli situation, right? People would complain about how shit Itto is. Basically, every Geo character that we have today wouldn't be dealing as much damage if Geo did not get the buff that it received. Would Genshin Impact would even still be alive if Geo or Zhongli didn't get a buff? Just imagine this, you pulled for Zhongli, his shield is very shit, he's not keeping you alive, his damage is very shit, he's not dealing any damage to the enemies. Would players even still play the game at this point if the character they pulled for, Zhongli, was, this shit? The game would definitely be like a very awful shit show. Just imagine you go into Inazuma, you try to fight Magukinki with your Zhongli, and since Zhongli is not buffed, you're basically fucked by that Magukinki and his sword. A slash from Mangun Kinki would just fuck you up real good. HoYoverse at this point would probably have to nerf the enemies since they decided not to buff Zhongli. Would we even have the Rift Lord enemies if Zhongli didn't get buffed? I feel like HoYoverse added those enemies in because since Zhongli is so powerful and strong, they decided to add the Rift Wolf enemies to kind of counter Zhongli's shield. Or maybe we would still get the Rift Wolf hounds, but they would probably do something different instead. I don't know. Same thing with the Serpent Knights too, right? They basically exist to counter shields, and since Zhongli is, you know, weakly, then would they even still be in the game, or maybe they just do something different instead? This is a pretty big what if question because Geo getting a buff was a huge game changer for Genshin Impact. So if Zhongli didn't get a buff and HoYoverse did nerf the enemies since Zhongli is weak as fuck, Genshin Impact, or I guess HoYoverse, could die another way. A Chinese civilian might get pissed at the fact that HoYoverse did not buff Zhongli, and, you know, I don't know, worst case scenario, they decide to like assassinate Dao Wei or some shit. CCP would be disappointed in HoYoverse. They would shut down Genshin, and that would be a wrap, I guess. There would be no Star Rail, there would be no Fontaine, we would never find out how Genshin Impact ended. Genshin Impact would be dead at this point, all because they didn't buff Zhongli. As ridiculous as that sounds, I might actually be right because, like I said, the Geo change was a big game changer, and, you know, we know how China is, right? If China is not represented well, then the CCP might get involved. I am absolutely happy that HoYoverse decided to buff Geo because I don't want this game to die, and I think Geo is a pretty interesting element. Still kind of a shame that Geo does not have a reaction with Dendro since plants and soil, you know, work together, but, you know, it is what it is. As of the current state of Geo right now, I think it's not as good right now, mostly because Dendro kind of took over. Dendro is just so fucking good. All you really need is EM or HP for Nilu's case, and you're basically good. You don't have to worry about building around crit rate or crit damage. One of Geo's problems is the crystallized reaction. That reaction does jack shit since Zhongli's shield basically takes care of everything. And since the crystallized reaction doesn't really deal any damage, the only way you can increase the damage of Geo is relying on the artifacts. You need crit rate and crit damage for your Geo characters to deal any damage. Geo is really no different from physical. It's just an orange colored of physical. That's it. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think. How would you think Genshin Impact would be if Geo never got buffed? Do you think Geo would be, or do you think Genshin would be dead? Would it be like on life support? Would someone actually, do you really think a civilian would assassinate HoYoverse? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.